Hey folks, how's it going? So, doing the things that I do on this channel, the number one question I get from people is how does this gear compare to this gear? And that's no exception with headphones. I get tons of people asking me how does this headphone compare with this headphone? And the number one question I got in the past few weeks has been how does the Verum 1 headphones compare to the Edition XX, the Audeze headphones? And a lot of people have been asking me how does it compare to this headphone, that headphone, the LCD2, 2C, etc. So this video has been delayed for quite a bit because I had to go over all those things, and I really wanted to answer your questions in this video. So obviously this video is going to be a little bit longer than usual, so I suggest you go grab a cup of coffee. So did you grab a cup of coffee or tea? Because it's story time. The Verum 1 headphones here were designed in Ukraine by someone who loves headphones and who loves music just like you and I. So this was a DIY project and that came to life through Kickstarter. And he decided to provide it to people like you and myself who love headphones and music. And I'm glad that he did so. Now, there are quirks with this headphone in terms of build quality because it was designed by someone like you and myself. It is not to manufacturing standards per se, but with that being said, he is getting a lot of support with Kickstarter and he just started, literally kickstarted. So we're gonna give him a little bit of time to fix these problems, but we'll get into the build quality right now. Now, we will get into the sound quality very soon and the comparisons, but the build quality on this headphone is very important because it kind of makes you think. If my friend, right, Nick or Tujin, told me, hey, I made this headphone, I would be freaking amazed. I would be absolutely blown out of the waters, right? But if someone told me that this was designed by a manufacturer, like Audeze or Hifiman, I would have a little bit of problems because the build quality is not really up to standards in the books of the manufacturing world. And let me explain what I'm talking about. So the first thing that I really like about the build quality, because I don't want to be all negative, is the fact that it's very, very comfortable. He got the distribution, the weight distribution perfectly fine. He got it right. Now, so with that being said, the overall headphone build quality is not too bad. It's not too shabby. But the only quirk that I have is this knob over here, which is seen on other headphones. So I hope that he can replace this with some kind of clicking mechanism, just like the Hifiman or Audeze. This will be much easier when you want to adjust it when you have the headphones on your head physically. So that's just my hope, and that's something I want for this headphone. Now, the overall headband padding is very comfortable. I don't have a problem with that. The only problem I have with this design is that it's kind of jerry-rigged per se. It seems jerry-rigged. And yeah, for the price, it's acceptable by no means. But if he decides to get seriously into this business, then I suggest that he comes up with something more permanent, more less jerry-rigged. Now, with this all being said, I'm being very nitpicky here because I have high expectations for this company in the upcoming years. And if you see everything, he has done everything very correctly. I mean, the swivel to the side, horizontally and vertically, is perfect. This headphone is very, very comfortable for its weight, which is around 520 grams, which is considered quite heavy in this day and age. So considering that, and even the recessed headphone jack here, everything is very well thought out. This was done by someone, I can really tell, this was done by someone who really cares, who really thought to himself, what can I bring to the table? What can I do things right? I've been complaining about Sennheiser cables and other manufacturer cables for the longest time, but what I do realize, as time went by, is that the manufacturing cost before adding in a quality cable per se is not feasible. As ridiculous as that sounds, this guy has proven every single manufacturer wrong. For the price asking, he's including this cable. Now, this cable is no high-end cable or something crazy, but just the way he did it, is absolutely acceptable for a stock cable. It's tangle-free, and it flows well. It has no problems with me whatsoever, and in fact, I wouldn't even bother changing this cable unless I want balanced. It comes with a screw-on quarter-inch jack over here. So if you do want balanced cables, then you have to get it from a third party, so they don't provide you with the balanced cable. And that's perfectly fine at this price point. And to be honest with you, this is perfectly fine. This is better than 99% of stock cables I've seen. So this is a really good job and really well thought out again. Now the pads are very unique in the way that it attaches. The pad, first of all, is a very, very plush material. It's pleather, I believe. And it has this ring inside that it's a metal ring like this. And this metal ring is a magnetic ring that attaches to the outer side of the housing. So this is the driver, and it just attaches like so. Like so. So now the finish I have to really talk about. The grill and the finish, this gloss wood finish, I don't know how he did this, but again, it's very well thought out. If you see the wood here that he plugged in for the hinges here, it's a gorgeous design, an absolutely gorgeous design, and I love it. Now, the verdict is that some people that I've shown this headphone to told me that it's a little bit cheap looking, and they're talking about the overall design with the headband and everything. Without the headband into the equation, I think this is an elegant design, and if you have something more firm with the headband design, I think this can be a really gorgeous looking headphone. Now, you've waited long enough, so let's get down to the sound quality and the comparisons. So the sound of this headphone is where it gets really interesting, because I want to go on record for saying this, but this headphone is really hard to beat in this price category. I would even far as to say this is the best headphone in this price range. And so let me get into the basic sound quality of this headphone and then start comparing it to other headphones that I have. So the Verum 1 headphones really impressed me with their low-end capabilities. And despite being an open headphone, it has a impact and dynamic like a speaker in the bottom end. And that's what impressed me the most. That is really unheard of in this price range. Now, the mid-range is very fluid, a little bit more articulate than some of the headphones that I will mention in a minute, but it's a little bit articulate, and the high frequencies are very extended, very airy. Now, despite all this, it's not a very big soundstage or perfect imaging that this headphone creates. It produces a more of a intimate experience. Despite all the things that I've talked about, it's airy on the top end. It has a lot of air. It's very sparkly, and it can be a tad bright on some tracks, especially on not well recorded tracks. However, the mid-range is fluid. The vocals come out naturally, and overall is very well balanced. And the bass quantity is there, but it's not overwhelming, and the quality of the bass is incredible. It is very well controlled despite being able to go down that low, which is very impressive. It doesn't bleed. The mid bass or any of the bass does not bleed into the mid range, and does not color the high frequencies. So that was very impressive to me. Now, going over with some of the headphones that I have here, I think the most requested comparison with the Verum 1 headphones were the Audeze LCD2. And the Audeze LCD2 headphone is an interesting comparison, to say the least. Despite the differences in price, obviously the Audeze LCD2 seems more premium in every way in terms of build and even weight. The LCD2 weighs a little bit more. The difference between the Audeze LCD2 and the Verum 1 is that the LCD2 clearly wins in layering. It It has a very good capability in layering its instruments and vocals in such a way that it's not very crowded, and the depth of this headphone is really outshining a lot of the headphones out there, including the ones that are flagship. So this is a very underestimated headphone, to say the least. And the interesting fact here is that the Verum 1 can actually go up against the LCD2, but there's a catch. The Verum 1 scales very well. So with an amplifier like the Atom, the LCD2 sounds better. There's no doubt about that. And then if you go to the LCD2 still sounds better, but it's more closely matched. The Verum 1 is very close to the LCD2. Now, if you go to something like the i5 Pro iCan, then the depth and layering becomes as good as the LCD2. So how about the LCD2C, which is the second most requested comparison? When I have the Verum 1s connected to the Atom or even the it kind of destroys the Audeze LCD2 Classic in the low frequencies. The mids are slightly better in the LCD2 Classic in terms of imaging and separation in the instruments. And the soundstage is larger on the LCD2 Classic. However, when the Verum 1 is connected to something like the i5 iPro iCan, it just absolutely destroys the LCD2 Classic in every way possible. The layering and depth of the Verum just gets so much better. And that's a direct comparison when I connect both of these headphones to the i5. With the i5, the LCD2 Classic does get better layering, depth, and soundstage, but the Verum 1 gets so much better. Just scales like no tomorrow. So with that being said, these two headphones are excellent, but the Verum 1 gets an edge in terms of its scaling capabilities. So now getting to the Hifiman headphones. The Edition XX Mass Drop and Hifiman collaboration. Now this headphone is much like the Edition X version 2. And this headphone I really loved. And it can do a lot of things that the Verum can't. Now in terms of the low frequencies, the Verum 1 seems to be extending a little bit more into the low frequencies. However, the Edition XX has this warm presentation to it. So it's a really close comparison. I really can't say I prefer one to the other. I would say the Verum 1 has a more cleaner bass than the Edition XX, but the Edition XX has a more fluid mid-range that is just to die for. The high frequencies, however, gets interesting because it's really on par. And in some tracks, the Verum 1 has more detail retrieval in the high frequencies than the Edition XX. So that was very impressive to me. But if you're looking at the overall presentation, I would say the Verum 1 is more balanced, while the Edition XX is more mid-centric. Now looking at something in its price category with the sales going on, is the Hifiman Sundara. And this headphone and this headphone is no comparison. So the Sundara in terms of low frequency gets destroyed by the Verum 1. The Verum 1 absolutely blows it out of the water in terms of low frequency. The Sundara doesn't have the impact or the amount of low frequency that the Verum 1 can produce. Now in terms of mid-range, is very close. However, the Verum 1 is less offensive to me despite the fact that it's more articulate. And that is pretty impressive. The Sundara has a very good mid-range, but it's articulate, and in some tracks it can be a little bit too bothersome, too bright, too sibilant. But the Verum 1 really does a well job in the mid-range to kind of get rid of that. Now in the high frequencies, the Sundara does get a little bit tad bright in the high frequencies. And that goes the same for the Verum 1. It can get tad bright on some tracks, especially the ones that are not very well recorded. However, I still find the Verum 1 still a little bit more airy on the top end and gives that kind of effect where it's not too piercing or sibilant. Whereas on the Sundara, it feels a little bit closed down on the top compared to the Verum 1. So that concludes my review for the Verum 1 headphones, and I have deep expectations for the future of Verum audio. So thank you for watching and stay tuned.